Game on.
We are now at Zooming in Gameful Heroes podcast, Misruk Atid. And today we are hosting Ziv Lavee from Copenhagen, and we're going to talk about the COVID-19 with relation to the WoW corrupted blood incident plague. So Ziv, welcome to the show and start.
Hi, from Copenhagen. The story we're talking about is the corrupted blood incident about 12 years ago when in the famous game World of Warcraft, which was released by Blizzard. At that period, they had a new dungeon release for a raid size battle, which means there were about 25 or 40 people, actually 20 and then later, and also 40 people fighting a single monster. As you can see in the background, the monster is known as a car.
Yeah, just switch it that we could see this guy below us. Yeah, it was like
this
it
is
was
the bastard that
Blizzard.
started ever.
Yeah, it was Blizzard 10. It wasn't by the players. It was a Blizzard upgrade patch or upgrade mission, right?
Well, yes and no.
Okay.
Blizzard did release the content of that particular boss, and that boss had a certain debuff that it would put on players that gives damage over time, and healers had to cleanse it. While an endgame player with high gear and being joined with additional high-end players can handle this kind of plague. If this thing ever hit a sensitive group or a group that has don't has the capacity and the resources of a whole raid, then that person would most likely die.
So it's like a resemblance between, if you see this monster, that if I'm in high level rank in World of Warcraft, I can handle it, and together with some high rank player, we can beat it. But if I'm low rank, something will happen to me, and I could be...
you're pretty much, you start dying. But the thing about the corrupted blood, that in that particular fight, a player who got the corrupted blood would know to stand out of the group, wait for the healer to heal, and then continue the fight. However, there was a slight miscalculation. A certain class has a pet that they can summon and dismiss. They don't need the pet around them all the time. So
a pet is a virtual animal that go with the warrior.
Yeah, it's not a player. It's generated by the game.
But the player can carry it with him.
What happened? The pet got the corrupted blood, and when the hunter dismissed it, the pet was sort of like dormant or in a cryogenic stasis, if you want to call it. And then when they got out of the dungeon and they went about their business, hunters would dismiss their pets, and the pets still had the corrupted blood. And if that pet came in contact with other players or other NPCs, which is even more impressive, those would get the corrupted blood. Now, for a player to get the corrupted blood,
this is the result that you can see. Okay, this is the result.
Yes, after quite fast, this is ended up. This is a big city populated with a lot of populated by a lot of players and NPCs. And what we see now is the result of all the players or low-level NPC dying from the corrupted blood. It worked just like a very, very contagious disease. It just spread from one to the next, multiplying exponentially, so and so and so. And it was actually a very interesting thing to observe from a scientific point of view.
Well, interestingly enough, a woman researcher named Dr. Nina Pepperman, she's a mathematician and epidemiological researcher. She's also a gamer. And she noticed this and said, well, this is kind of interesting. Let's see what can we do. Can we learn something about the behavior of the virtual avatar in World of Warcraft in the plague can we, how do you say, להשליך in English? How can we
extrapolate?
Yeah, extrapolate or learn something about real epidemics of human behavior. When we trying to estimate the plague, which we're using mathematical models in order to analyze the data and also to predict what's going to be in the future. And her claim was that usually you take a lot of data which concern with the medical situation, but we're not implementing within the equation, like the formula, like the algorithm. You dismiss the human factor or the human psychology and behavioral patterns of people. She said, if we're having a WoW plague now, let's see how people behave. What do you mean by people? The avatar behave, and can we learn something from it? And she came with very interesting stuff about it.
Yeah, I think when it comes to behavior, you can see a whole range of possibilities. You can see from, in that scenario, like people who had healer role, or in that case, somebody who has medical background trying to pitch in and trying their best to help others.
Volunteeringly, that's what we say, volunteeringly. It doesn't have to.
Volunteering, yes. Using their own time. Yeah. Of course, it's nothing like a person, it's not like somebody comes to you and start operating on you to get the virus out, but using their own resources to try and contain it. And of course, like anything, the resources, especially in the WoW Classic, was limited. So you can only heal up to a certain number of people, and then you had to rest a bit or move aside. So if it's spreading exponentially, you can't really do anything. People put warnings saying, don't approach this area. It's currently under corrupted blood, sort of like a quarantine. And you also had the negative variations of it.
On the spectrum, you had also the other people that say, let's hack it and let's
intentionally.
Infect intentionally everybody around because it's fun. It's like hacking the city.
So that is one of the things that we in games we're allowed to play roles that normally we wouldn't. But we do. But it is a human behavior, a known human behavior that some people would go like, who has some sort of disease, they run around with a syringe and just prick people in the street in hope to get them infected as well.
Yeah. So sure. So I highly recommend Dr. Nina Pepperman. She's still researching about the plague and all sorts of epidemics. Lectures. She lectured a few years ago. She lectured on the Game Development Association, the Serious Game Session, also a few years ago. And I think one of the main key, findings of her research was that people playing as avatars play as themselves, not as avatars like character 3D animation, but they manifest their everyday life behaviors and motivation. For example, curiosity, which is saying that I'm getting into the plague area in order to see what's going on, it's a big factor. She also said that we as humans are not good as much as machines in tackling severe situation in which you need to make decision. This is also another, finding of her study.
Yeah, I mean, you can also. The thing is, in game, you don't have so many consequences, so you can experiment with different types of behavior that normally you wouldn't. For example, we all had the situation in Skyrim, that we're just get fed up with all the annoying NPCs, and we just go into a town and start killing everybody, man, women, and child, and whatever.
Yeah.
However, when you invest a lot of time in a game like WoW, you would usually prefer to maintain a certain persona, which would be, I would call positive in a way, because if you're behaving like a cheat bastard, or someone who is dishonorable, or someone who likes to steal the loot when the monster dies,
asshole, right.
nobody would want to group with you.
Yeah.
And I remember having situations like that when I was in communication with somebody, and then somebody told me, listen, this guy, don't trust him because he's known to steal loot in the middle of a dungeon and so on. So you would aspire to, I guess, be yourself, assuming you're not in real life a stealing bastard. So yeah, that's why even in games you would see people playing their own personas, and only on a rare occasion they would shift to something a little more extreme. Especially when the game mechanic didn't allow so much for such a destructive behavior. So major cities usually had stronger NPCs in case somebody tries to break the laws. But if you go to the outskirts, like in the small outpost, then yeah, I come to a horde area with my alliance character and can just start killing the NPCs and the quest givers and everything and ruin for everybody else's game. Yeah, you can see this is actually a high-level character because once you start seeing the blood dripping from him, you'll see that he is able to survive it. Yeah. You see the health not going down, but if like there we go, people start dying.
All the people around him just getting blooded. Yeah, wow.
Yeah.
Very fast, actually. And you revive, like it's after one day, after several hours, you can get back to the game. But still,
And if you look, I don't think we can see it here, but if you go to the NPCs in the cities, that's what I want to say, that are usually very strong. Yeah, they can handle the blood. I mean, they can just carry it indefinitely, and they used to spread the disease even further. And imagine a place like a bank or an auction house where a lot of players are all the time. That you can't really contain that.
Yeah. This is amazing. Just like, so people can, I mean, if I need to make a really tough decision, which goes with them real, how do you say, emotional burdens, like who should we save first, the kids or the elderly? Because if I'm low rank, I'm like the elderly now in the COVID-19. Should they go into the city? Should they don't go to the city? So this is kind of,
yes, and I would say, sadly, in a way, this is where the social, the experiment on a virtual world stops, because what happened is that Blizzard just had to go in and do a reset.
Yeah, this is what we want to do, right? To reset the world. Yeah, this is the best thing to do.
Exactly. But we cannot do that. We don't have the reset button. Yeah, I believe there are a lot of eyes going now into the world trying to see like which country actually has the best scenario.
Yeah, I think that several people also think that they are resetting their mindset, and if you follow the airplanes traffic, you can almost say that few countries have reset the country in a way, I think. Yeah.
It's definitely going to be a different world after we get out of this one.
I just want
to
hope to visit Copenhagen again.
There's just going to be so much impact on so many fields, and I can only hope that we will get better from it. Like it will be an evolutionary process and not going backwards.
Let's say if you wish, I mean, this is the if you wish you could restart the world. This is like a slogan, you know. Gaming is essential now, like sport, and if let's just reset the world, reset our mindset to think differently about.
The question is, do you want to reset to how we were before?
This is the question. It's not a.
Or do you want to see like what happens afterward?
Yeah.
Of course, the damage and the death toll and everything, and the suffering that people have and the businesses, it's pretty horrible.
Yeah. This is not a game.
Yeah, there's I mean, it's fun to fantasize about how things are going, but that's just a thing. There is no reset button. We just have to keep going on and hope that at the end of the line or when we reach the next base, we can make it as better as possible.
I want to share with you my intake about the research on WoW Plague Corrupted Blood. I think that, for example, in Israel, the relationship between government and citizen, because it's everything is based on trust. and you have to give right instruction to be fully transparent with your citizen in order for them to cooperate with what you administer them. From Nina Pepperman study, I learned that you should take into account in the equation, every equation that you do, number of breeding machine, whatever health situation, you should also take into account the psychological and behavioral research data and behavioral analysis of how people behave and the patterns that they show in real time. I'm not sure that in Israel they're doing it. I'm not sure that they are taking into account also the damage, the psychological damage, and also the behavioral patterns that people do or administered in this kind of crisis. I'm sure that people in other countries, from what I see, take into account, are more considerate, more transparent. In Israel, I don't see it. It's everything coming from above. Saying gamer research, but here it's citizen research.
Yeah,
it's not good. So this is my take from the study.
Yeah, without going into too much politics stuff, I try to follow
politics.
it. But
it's not politics. It's like genuine.
Yeah, I know what you mean. I know what you mean. And when this all started, I was certain that the country that has the most immediate response would be Israel, and it looks like that they did. Like they responded relatively fast. They have the capacity of handling crisis, like immediate crisis. Sadly, from
first
dealing
response,
like with multiple
first response teams, of course.
Yeah, I mean, we when you had to respond to an explosion in the city and with 25 dead and 100 wounded, then you need to be able to respond to that. You need to be able to respond to close different part of the city, to capture some suspect of whatever.
Well,
however,
we're giving a big high five to all the doctors and really appreciate them and whatever they do. But
by all means,
but unlike let's say first response reaction or training or whatever skills that you have,
the long term
we're talking about a long period of time. So
yeah,
it's going to be different.
The long term would that would be the main problem. But we also saw it in wars. We always had number of casualties in Yom Kippur or in the Lebanon war, but there's a whole bunch of other people that are still carrying out, whether physically or mentally injured.
Yeah.
And that also something that you would never see in a game, because, okay, if my character dies, nobody is affected by it. But if somebody dies, the family of that person is affected by it.
Well, the question is to take one-to-one. I mean, the game world to the real world. But I guess that if you get into the models of how to communicate with citizen, the way that you to take into account also the behavioral patterns that people do, and to להתחשב בזה. I don't know how to say it in English, but
I mean, we actually had
we should recommend health minister in Israel, because I don't know who is it now, because they're going to change. We should decision makers should also read this kind of research if they have the time, and even if they don't, because I think it's physical treatment or health treatment לא פחות חשוב. Also the mental health, and also being on the level of trust with the citizen.
Yeah, I would actually like to point out, I couldn't find the source of it. I'll try to look at that later, but there was a certain research that was done, I think, by a Canadian group about the future gamer. And they presented
I saw it. We can talk about it.
The pale, frail, unsocial person. And it was so annoying, because
it was.
Let's as you say, let's take the other factors of it, because a gamer is also a curious person. A gamer, if directed correctly, it can be a person that would look for a solution to problems, that would aspire to
exactly.
create more. Like, for example, if you play a game and you're unhappy with a game, and you say, okay, this game allows add-on. Why don't you write an add-on for it?
Yeah, let's mod it. We call it modded. I think gameful mindset about everything is possible. It's a Mossad synonym. So if you can put enough effort and you have the grit, and you can make the impossible possible. And Ziv, I wish to thank you very much for being here in this special every day, let's say, podcast
edition.
Special edition of GamefulHeroes podcast live broadcast. It should be podcast live on YouTube, and I invite you to follow GamefulHeroes Juloot. So thank you very much. Bye bye.
Thank you. Bye. Well, I can only say one thing, guys. Play it safe now, so we can have a hell of a time afterwards.
Great. Game on.